When Jack Drury and his fiancée Anna's episode of Escape to the Country aired on Wednesday, February 7th, they couldn't have predicted the response. Viewers took to social media to air their astonishment at the pair's budget of £850,000 to purchase their first home together, which they hoped would be in leafy Buckinghamshire outside London. Many detrimental remarks and negative speculations were posted by people who watched the episode. Within hours of Express.co.uk reporting on the instalment, Jack got in touch to offer to respond to the backlash. Speaking via Zoom the next morning, he acknowledged that the program was a very fair reflection of the 3 days we had with the team. However, he feels that people's frustrations are being misplaced, as the issue isn't their means to purchase a property, but rather the property market in general. The right source of frustration here is that the government have failed to build enough houses for decades, which means that property prices have outstripped wage growth for the best part of 50 years. And this is a time bomb. It's an economic, demographic, societal time bomb, he told us from his home in Hertfordshire. The real story, I think, of that episode is that our budget does not bias the average detached house in Buckinghamshire. Escape to the Country gave that number as £881,000, which is above our budget. So we can't even buy the average detached house according to the show. We've moved from, well, we have stayed in Hertfordshire, but we were looking at leaving here, and in St Albans, the going rates for a Victorian workers' terrace, a 3-bed house that was put up for Victorian labourer with one income, is £750,000, which nowadays demands 2 people, 2 salaries and some sorts of deposit. Now people should be frustrated with that, he exclaimed. Although it appears the couple had a huge budget, it was made clear on the show that both work. Anna is a civil servant and Jack is a consultant. And they also both already owned properties, which they were selling and pooling resources to purchase a home. They wanted to find a place where they could one day raise a family, and that, more immediately, would provide a garden and space for their dog Dexter. Despite this, many people queried how they had access to such an impressive amount at such a tender age. I will say that people's assumptions are wrong, he said, but I'm not going to stoke the fire by talking about finances. What it takes to be on the property ladder today is better than average paid jobs to buy the average house and discipline when it comes to outgoings. I mean, what people have assumed is totally false. And let's be honest, the vast majority of this budget is the banks, he admitted. He later added via email, there has been intense speculation about our own circumstances. While I consider this to be largely a private matter, to quell the mummy and daddy nonsense, I will say that we inherited in circumstances nobody would choose, and recognize that we are very fortunate to earn salaries that we can leverage. Asked why they applied to the show when there was the potential for backlash, he revealed, they do a lot of the legwork and research. The researchers had looked at dozens of houses. We were shown the paperwork of several and we viewed 3. We were shown areas that we hadn't thought about or hadn't really made the time to think, actually let's go and spend a weekend here and explore, and that was really useful in this process. And we applied to the show because we wanted to move to a village, which we have. So you know, a year ago, I wanted that kind of house and life that we have now as of right at the end of last year. So it's about as genuine as it gets for moving to the country, he smiled. Despite the backlash, and the fact they didn't find their dream property through it, Jack, who comes across as down-to-earth and erudite, during the interview, says his experience of doing the show wasn't tainted. I am possibly as furious as the people who complained about the general state of the housing market. And I have been for years. I spent years in London paying my landlord's mortgages because they were lucky enough to buy their flats when they did. And I speak to couples and people in their 60s and 70s who years ago, on very normal jobs, bought houses that are completely out of my reach today. And that I find just as offensive as everybody who's seen the show, he admits. It is the biggest problem we have right now. It is really, really serious if you have people in your 20s today that are potentially never going to be able to buy a house, they are never having children, and look at the state of some nations already with population decline. For their part, Jack and Anna are very happy in their new home in rural Hertfordshire, as is Dexter. Dexter is a gorgeous boy and he is extremely happy here. Jack enthuses, immediately lighting up when he talks about his pooch. Dexter has got a garden for the first time. H has got into fields. I mean, I step out of my house now, my most worn shoes are my wellies, and I can step out into fields with Dexter running around. And I would change that for the world. Dexter is in fact the reigning handsomest hound of our neighboring village, he says proudly. They do a little dog show. Even that, you should be able to have a dog as part of a family. You can't have dogs in the flats you're stuck in London. I was never allowed to dog when I rented, he concludes, reminded of yet another issue in the current housing market. Escape to the Country is on BBC One weekdays at 3 p.m.